Hello.
Hello.
These turns make you so happy.
We turn our chairs now. Anyone who's just listening, Elisa said it'd be funny one time if we introed by turning our chairs. So the visual is that before we say hello, our chairs turn. And I think it's funny.
It's like it's kind of like a villain in a Pixar movie.
Yes.
Like dun dun dun.
Ta-da.
But we're not villains. We're here fighting the good fight.
That's an interesting way to describe this podcast.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about
it's
that.
worth it.
Hold on, random. What's for dinner tonight? It's gonna
I
say.
don't know. Sammy and I are roughing it because my husband's out of town.
Okay.
So she wants some bulldog ramen, where
Okay.
you like mix cheese in it and stuff like that.
Did not
So
know that was a thing.
you don't know what bulldog is?
No, I think our listener Z would be happy to hear about that.
It's like better quality ramen than the Maruchan like typical
Okay.
ones. And it comes with a cheese packet and it comes with a really spicy sauce packet, so we can only add a few drops of the spiciness
Wow.
part, but it's a carbonara
Hmm.
ramen. So some people add an egg yolk to it to make it creamier. Other people add shredded cheese to it. There's some recipes that add milk to it. It's like, I don't know, everyone on TikTok has their own way of preparing it. So she asked for
Dang.
that. We might have that today.
We'll move on. Let's move
For
on.
the sake of people leaving. It's like on instant messenger that like the door closing. Like I'm
I
hearing all this.
listen, but if we're going to talk about fundamentalism,
Yeah.
this is what we're about to talk about, fundamentalism for 30 minutes, we're going to need to preload that with some what's for dinner content.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what the people need. It's good for them too. Okay, we got to cut
Yes.
them out of this heavy content.
More recipes incoming for when
Okay,
it
well
gets to
maybe
be
we'll
too
end with
heavy.
a good recipe.
Okay.
Okay. So I was very excited to talk about fundamentalism today because it's on my like wish list. So I'll give you some ideas about it and then Elisa's gonna chime in with her thoughts. How's that work?
My raw reaction.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. First of all, welcome to the Fundamentalism Convo by Jennifer. Okay, first of all, I think we should get the languaging on target because the term fundamentalism can refer to several things. First, it can refer to like a specific subset of Christianity. So, fundamentalist Christianity or evangelical fundamentalist Christianity is a sometimes what people label themselves as, or sometimes other people label themselves as fundamentalists. That one goes back to some pamphlets that were written in like the last 100 years. I don't have all the details, but like there were some pamphlets written that were like about the fundamentals of Christianity. And it was at a time when science and modernity were starting to push against like the literal interpretation of scripture, like the creation story or like the how we got the Bible, like these different facts or science things started pushing on how we interpret those beliefs. And so the fundamentalism was a push back against that. So
Okay.
you've got this like cultural movement happening.
Yeah. It reminds me of the struggle that comes up for a lot of churches with postmodernism.
Yes.
Yeah, or like sitting with some uncertainty and stuff. And they're like, no, there is certainty because look at these points. Look at what's in the black and white. Very fundamentalist, I would say, if we're using that term.
Yes.
Or
So it's
churches, I'm sorry.
okay.
Or or people that are like, "Oh, you should come to my church. It's great. It's Bible based. The preacher preaches verse by verse. It's the fundamentals of Christianity because it's right there written."
Thank you, Elisa, because that brings me to my secondary point, which is that a general definition of fundamentalism is a strict adherence to specific religious doctrines or literal interpretations. So
Mhm.
it could be even not Christianity, but any religious group that looks at their document and says, we have to interpret this usually very old document literally, and we have to
Mhm.
follow it with rigidity. Like that's a more of a fundamentalist version of that religion. Whereas
Mhm.
a more modern group is going to be like, oh, well, like we're Christian and we like the Bible is a part of that, but we interpret it differently.
Hmm.
You can tell.
Well, I think that they use the term extremist in some circumstances, like people with a literal interpretation of jihad that don't take into account the complexity of humans coexisting and stuff like that. Our Western culture tends to call those people terrorists or extremists or religious extremists. Islamic extremism is the Wikipedia article.
Hmm.
Okay. I'm probably going to get the FBI coming to my house because of what I'm Googling.
Dude, I have no interest in messing with like Islamic fundamentalism is
Uh-huh.
its own
Yeah.
terrifying group.
Yeah.
Like
So,
straight to violence.
okay. So, anyways, our Western culture tends to label these groups as like religious extremist, even like terrorist organizations and stuff like that that are based on religion.
Yeah.
Because of a literal interpretation of scripture or a literal ideology from some sort of leader, right?
Yeah, but that's an interesting point because in America, fundamentalism is celebrated in a lot of places and normalized, where you have a literal interpretation of scripture. But then, from a like I guess a Judeo like a white Christian American perspective, in another part of the world where you have a different religion, where the fundamentalist concept is put on their scripture, you see like a increase in like extremism and violence and terrorism. You know,
Well, some people would celebrate that dedication, whereas other people would be embarrassed about it, just kind of like what we see. But I think it's on a different level when you're talking about killing people
right.
and things like that.
Well, the nuance goes both ways. Like, not all fundamentalist religious people are violent terrorists.
Right.
In Christianity or Islam, we do know of the like extreme sects.
Hmm.
So it's like an umbrella or something.
Yeah. For some reason, I'm thinking of kamikaze bombers, you know,
Yeah.
people that are just like really bought into an ideology or a mission to the point of death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm thinking of these Bible verses that that are also the same flavor. So interesting.
It is like the concept is like to pick apart where fundamentalism like is the whole thing a problem? Is there something going on with extreme dedication and the belief that you are in the one true religion and you need to follow it with purity? Like, is that always a wrong turn that's gonna like end with a kamikaze or are we sometimes those people, maybe they're not in a kamikaze situation, but are they not also giving up their entire life for their religion if they're going to be
Hmm.
that devout, which is like what's being pushed in fundamentalism? Like, it's an interesting
Yeah.
question. Can you do it safely and maintain autonomy and be a fundamentalist?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like your values get compromised sometimes to the point where you're not even sure what they are outside of the group.
Yeah.
So, or it's like
It's,
you can have a gut reaction to something or like a gut instinct, but what it says here is the opposite. So, my only choice is to ignore my gut instinct, right?
yeah.
So,
It's like, are the principles of fundamentalism like the same principles that also use coercive control to usurp someone's autonomy and make them believe that like it's us versus them thinking, it's high stakes thinking, it's extremism, it's black and white. Like, are they not one and the same where, or can you separate it out and say, well, I believe in the literal interpretation of scripture and I believe I'm in the one true religion and I believe in following it rigidly and I have autonomy and expression. Like, can you have it all or not?
I I think you can if you're a fringe member, you can say those things. But if everything that you have and are, or like even if your sense of safety depends on being completely all in. I don't know if you have that luxury to say the last thing of I have autonomy. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the formula for deconstruction, I think.
Yeah. Is
Hmm.
it not an oxymoron to say you're a fringe member of fundamentalism that requires you to be all in? You can't be a fringe member that's all in.
Yeah, I don't know if you can last very long in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would create too much cognitive dissonance because what you're hearing is really rigid and it evokes obedience, it evokes swallowing your questions, blind faith type of thing. But if you're saying, I'm autonomous and I can think for myself, all you're going to develop are questions and doubts and kind of your own path. And so either they're going to kick you out or you're not going to feel comfortable hearing their messages anymore. And so you'll leave on your own.
Interesting.
Am I hijacking this? You
No,
got all these points set up.
no, we're talking about them. This is awesome. So it is like what you're saying is if you want to be a free thinker and be a fundamentalist, it's going to be very difficult for you to maintain the community because eventually, like, the community is going to eject you or you're going to self-eject from that.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not going to trust you if you're too independent or if you're too liberal, if you're too anything that deviates from their main points. It's going to be like, well, if you don't believe in this, then I question your salvation type
Yeah.
of thing. And these are the exact words that you hear in these circles.
Yeah.
So it's really all or nothing. And so if there's a little sprinkle of something that's quite different than their ideology, they are very quick to cut that branch off and let it dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna share this anecdote. I wasn't thinking about this, but like I think I sent you or posted this Britt Hartley video on Instagram. I love following her stuff. And she dialogued with ChatGPT.
Oh, I did listen to it. Yeah.
Okay, did you see that she asked them or asked the computer,
It it
asked
it.
it, it's not a person, what the most harmful version of religion was. And it said it was like the answer, I think she may have massaged this out of it, but like it ended up being like fundamentalist Christianity,
Mm,
not Islam or anything like
yeah.
and she said it was because fundamentalist Christianity poses as such a safe, open, loving, like marketable religious group, but then they have these very like high control dynamics. So
Mm,
that combo makes it more actually like difficult for participants to like know what they're involved in. Because
yeah.
it's not so forward.
Yeah. It's like really seeker friendly.
Yeah.
Other religions aren't really interested in evangelizing or trying to like make this package deal that people are interested in. Other religions just tend to be like, this is us moving forward.
Yeah.
Whereas Christianity makes this really warm reception. And then sometimes there's like a bait and switch involved.
Yeah. Like Orthodox Judaism, like they're pretty upfront. Like they make you do all of this. Like you have to be aware of what you're committing to. It's a
Hmm.
very rigorous process. There's a lot of rules. But it's not seeker friendly. There's no
Right.
false advertising. But
Right.
like, yeah, when you make a high demand fundamentalist version of a religion seeker friendly, it just becomes so that's where it becomes culty because then you have that like misleading recruitment strategies where you want someone to buy into it and then you want them to give everything up.
Hmm.
That's what's
Yeah.
so complicated about it.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the interesting thing. Do you think so fundamentalism as like a religious to Christianity started with that pamphlet. That's only 100 years old. But the concept of like a religion that's very devout to their text and believes they're the one true religion applies way before that. Do you have any examples of fundamentalism in like a historical context? Because I came up with some I want to tell you about. But you go
Well,
first.
no, you go right ahead. I feel ill prepared for that. So,
Okay, well, let me tell you what me and ChatGPT worked out.
okay.
Okay, we determined that fundamentalism as a broader social movement was always a reaction to a move away from whatever the traditional like way of life or religious belief was. So I asked it for specific examples and it talked to me about Egyptian culture.
Hmm.
Um, in ancient Egypt, one prominent example is during the reign of Akhenaten. He attempted to shift Egypt to monotheism, worshiping Aten. After his death, there was a strong reaction against this with a return to traditional polytheism. So this is like totally a different religious context, right? But this involved reasserting the worship of old gods and strict religious practices. Of a this can be seen as a form of religious fundamentalism, where traditional religious beliefs were rigidly reinforced in a reaction to Aten's reforms. So, he was trying to push them into a different religion, and then
Yeah.
boom, pull back.
Yes, we've talked about the pendulation effect in society.
Yeah.
Of there's a reaction to some sort of disorganization, and then people vote for something that's rigid, and then it swings back with the next generation and things. So yeah, that tracks as part of human behavior in a society.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And I
So how
think
did they enforce all of that?
I know I'd like to like research more about what else went down in the Egypt thing. I don't honestly know like
Hmm.
how culture played out or like at what point did they continue on polytheism. But I think if you look at our culture, like we were just talking about politics right now. And like, yeah, it was 100 years ago when that pamphlet came out and like, but our generation is living in the dawn of so much technology where like, yeah, 100 years ago we had questions about evolution, but now kids can access that from their computers instantly. It's
Hmm.
not coming through a magazine or a news article. Like it's right in our faces all the time.
Hmm.
So I think that the increase in fundamentalism being so strong is just still an ongoing reaction.
Well, it's like fundamentalism. They came out with the pamphlets and it's kind of like a crackdown type of thing, it sounds like. Then you had like the Jesus movement, charismatic movements, and stuff like that. And so, where are we at? I have no idea the dimensions of this pendulum, but we have all this access to information. People are kind of separating from the church, but statistically, they're also seeing a pullback towards something that evokes certainty and congruency. And, or like you see the young men, the male 20-year-olds that are really getting super involved with fundamentalism again. And so it just makes you wonder, like, what did they see in generations past that they feel like aren't working? And so then there's this pull back. So um, I don't know how often this happens, but like I feel like at least some parts of the population are getting pulled back towards fundamentalism nowadays, and it just gets really polarizing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, I think of this like spiral dynamics because you can look at it on this large cultural lens of like
Hmm.
why would in general culture have a popping up of more fundamentalism in like the wider culture and also individually like when you're born and going through developmental phases and you want security and certainty and answers and when you're like young and you that complex thinking isn't as developed, like it is more, it's very, very appealing and palatable to have like hard and fast answers and like
Hmm.
also a little egocentric to feel like, oh, well, definitely the original religion I was born into is the one true religion. And like, definitely, this is all like clearly right. And then like it takes growth and maturity to hold the nuance of like, well,
Hmm.
I might be wrong or like it may not be according to my one perspective growing up might shift into other ones as you get more complex thinking.
Yeah, that whole process is so distressing, though.
Oh, totally. But so
Yeah.
is puberty. Like the growth is distressing.
Yeah.
It's
I'm kind
very
of thinking
hard.
about when the United States was founded. I'm wondering if our country was founded on a sort of political fundamentalism of like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution became gold, that set a precedence for years to come when some of it is irrelevant. But
Yeah.
at that time, like they had to be all in to a certain extent because of like the threat of war and the threat of like the revolution or, the threat of being taken back over and stuff like that. So having a sort of deviation from the mission would have been seen as treason, super dangerous for those people. So, could it be that they adhered so much to fundamentalism to preserve their lives? Or, I just wonder, was there the thinking at that time to even have that flexibility and choice based upon that culture?
Dang. It's like, can it shift from like the rigidity and the protection of a document that you're going to follow is the protection you need when you're forming your own country, and like it serves its purpose, but then as you develop on, holding it to that rigid standard in a new context is now the threat from within,
Yeah.
which feels like my take on even like fundamentalist Christianity is like maybe at some degree it feels good to believe that like your scriptures are like completely inerrant, or like that it's objectively true because it makes you like form these meaning making systems. But then if you hold on to that rigidity in society and in your life going forward, the rigidity itself becomes the harm from within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a doozy.
Yeah.
My analogy for this was a computer system, like installing malware on your computer is good because like so you need some rigidity so your system operates well. Like you need to be searching for like corrupt files or like ideas that are harmful and like sorting them out.
Mm-hmm.
But if your malware became so like over the top that it blocked all the updates
Yeah.
and you were still running off Windows 97 in
Mm-hmm.
2025, now your antivirus software is the problem.
Is it malware a virus?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So, right, so you have antivirus software on your
Mm-hmm.
computer to sort out the viruses, great. But if your antivirus software also blocks all your updates,
Firewall.
yeah, and firewalls, you're getting any updates for 25 years,
Yeah.
then your antivirus software isn't flexible enough to determine what is an update and what is a malware. That's a good
Mm.
analogy, right?
Yeah, that's good. And especially like if the firewall is based off of fear and concerns for the future and concerns about uncertainty. Okay, so a firewall that's based on fear would become even stronger and would really repel anything else that comes up to potentially threaten it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's complex thinking.
Yeah.
Interesting to put fear in there, which is kind of why we need to be afraid of malware on our computer, or else you're going to get, like, you're not going to have a functioning computer.
You're just going to click on all the pop-ups.
But if we're so afraid that we won't ever install an update, then we end up causing the harm we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. The computer shuts down and doesn't work anyways.
Dude, that's such a good analogy. I feel like that's what society is doing when you think about this, when you evaluate the pendulum switch to like ultra conservatism and
Hmm.
fundamentalism. It ends up like causing harm by trying to not cause harm.
Yeah. Do you know what made them write the pamphlets in the first place?
No, but I can look it up and tell you in 1 second. Okay, so you want to know more about the pamphlets that were called um, the fundamentalism? It's called the Fundamentals,
Okay.
and they were published in 1910 to 1915. That's what gave this movement its name. They outline the non-negotiable truths of Christianity, like the inerrancy of the Bible and the virgin birth, and they were aimed at drawing a clear line between true believers. See, there you go. Like the true
Mm.
believers have to believe it like this, and modernists. And so, to clarify, the modernists were people in American evangelical circles were dealing with things like evolution and
Uh-huh.
liberal theology that were gaining influence in that time.
Okay.
So basically, in my opinion, that's like the update to the system.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then they felt that, and they were afraid because the Christians felt that their traditional beliefs were under attack. And the pamphlets were a fast, easy way to push back and reinforce their interpretation of the Bible. It's like social media from the 1910s.
Yeah, this is the same thing as we're experiencing today. And
Yeah.
this is why churches split. This
Hmm.
is why the youth pastor can't work here anymore because, he started believing X, Y, or Z. We found that he didn't align. Farewell, Rob Bell. This type
Yeah.
of thing of the Twitter, I guess, is the new pamphlet or whatever. It's not new, but this is the type of thing that happens all the time. It's so predictable that it's like, okay, we need to separate the sheep from the goats, the wheat from the chaff, and this is the way to do it. These are the criteria. If you check off all the boxes, you're in. If you don't, you're out. Very reminiscent.
What about like the time that the Bible was being written then?
Okay.
Because you keep saying verses, like separating the wheat from the chaff, separate. So were those authors, I mean, okay, this is not going to be like a targeted question because there's so many authors. So you'd have to take them one at a time. But was there not, I guess you'd have to look at one book and when it was written, but what was going on at the time? If you're saying this is always looping, then were the authors of the biblical text not people pushing back into traditionalism, or were they the ones pushing out of it? Like,
Well, remember you and I talked about Gnosticism not too long ago, just in our spare time.
like the podcast isn't enough, so we
Right.
need extra convos.
Yeah. So the concept of Gnosticism is mentioned in the Bible, and you were like, the only thing I know about Gnosticism is that we're not allowed to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like other belief systems coming up and stuff where it's like, okay, Jesus didn't come back as fast as we thought he was going to. And so now you're left with this indefinite amount of time where it's like, so now what do we do? We have to adhere to the baseline things.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like people, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Okay,
Yes.
that's the message of Christianity a lot of the time. It's like you have to run the race, stick the course, and if you're deviating from that, even if you're like, this is common sense though, to accept this type of person, it's common sense to think in this way, X, Y, or Z is common sense. Well, the Bible trumps what your interpretation of common sense is, you know? So it's all the same thing of keeping us, and keeping
Okay.
them out.
Okay, but I'll do you one better.
Okay.
But what about like the teachings of Jesus, who spoke out against the Pharisees, who I think you could make a case that they were interpreting Jewish scripture very literally.
Mhm.
And there's multiple stories from Jesus saying like breaking the rules. That's like
Yeah.
the New Testament, like the gospel messages are Jesus breaking the rules of the Pharisees in order to have a more open and liberal approach to what like true religion is. So Jesus then, in that case, is an anti-fundamentalist in his core nature.
Okay.
If you want to like look at it that way, they're the fundamentalists and Jesus is the whole New Testament, like the Gospels are a model of modernity at the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah. But after Jesus died, I don't think the disciples would take the liberty of continuing on in that deviation from the norm. I
Right.
think there's a lot of writings by Paul that's like, you guys are trying to do all this, but come back to what we know, you know? And
Yes.
so, yeah, it then becomes a resistance of that. Or, some churches call themselves a remnant, because we're back to like the true form.
Correct. I think that Paul has a lot of writings that you would argue are fundamentalist in flavor
Hmm.
because they talk about like being the one true religion and like, obeying the like texts and the rules with rigidity.
Hmm.
It like he was more of a fundamentalist writer.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it'd be interesting too to know like more about Gnosticism and like the different sociological movements at the time of like some of those scriptures and to know like who would be the quote fundamentalists that were like pushing back and who were pushing forward.
Yeah.
Well, that's for another day, I guess.
I guess so.
Okay, now we have to finish with a recipe.
Okay. Yours
Um,
has to deal with orzo. That's your mystery ingredient.
Oh yeah. Okay. I will share my favorite is my new favorite this year is Boursin cheese.
Uh-huh.
You just pick it up in the deli. It's like in a little round thing. Stir that into some orzo, stir a tablespoon into spinach. Best thing ever. You could do
Okay.
orzo, boursin, shredded chicken, a can of tomatoes. What I do last week? I think that was it. And it was like the most delicious dish.
That's good. I've
Yeah.
tried something like that before with cherry tomatoes.
Oh yeah, I did cherry tomatoes too.
Cherry tomatoes.
Cherry tomatoes. And if you roast the cherry tomatoes in the oven first, that's like the highlight of the whole meal because they're so good like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that. I've done that with a block of feta too.
Ooh,
Yeah, where you put feta on the cookie tray and then the tomatoes around it, and then you drizzle it with olive oil and some seasonings, and then roast it, and then you mash it all up together. It makes like a pasta sauce. So good.
okay. I'll
That was a
try
two for
that.
one.
Two,
Yeah.
two for one, everyone. Melted cheese.
Cheese and tomatoes over some sort of pasta. Can't go wrong.
All right, well, that concludes fundamentalism with a recipe sandwich around it.
Okay. Are we doing part two for the next episode? I feel like we need a part two.
I mean, there's much more like we could read on it. Yeah, we can do part two.
You didn't get through all your points.
I know.
All right. Well, I'll see you next time for part two.
Can't
Unless
wait.
you're binging and it'll be in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.